welcome to the FanDuel running back analysis for Week 10. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Justin Elick at BigLeague42. You took a look at cash game, GPP, and value running backs for this week. And obviously, we can jump into the first one, which is probably the most obvious play that we've ever seen in the history of DFS.
Yeah, it's nice that we actually have a guy that's super chalk that isn't $4,500 or $5K or whatever, that it's a guy you actually have to pay for. But I don't want to call anybody stupid. Actually, I do want to call people stupid. You're stupid if you don't play him because, you saw what Tim Hightower and Mark Ingram did to this team and what literally everyone else has done to them. And I even noted here that the 49ers have given up more rushing yards than the Texans have given up passing yards. And I know the Texans are a good team against the pass, but that's an insane number after 9 weeks that they've given up that many rushing yards. So, it is the most obvious play, and I know they're 13-point favorites, but team total over 30 points. If you don't play David Johnson, I will enjoy watching you fail.
Yeah, those are harsh words.
Hey, it really is the most obvious play. There's a lot of running backs you can pay for, but I'll go down with the ship with 60% of the field and play him in every lineup because I just don't see any way around it.
Yeah, I think so, and especially on FanDuel. FanDuel is more lenient in terms of pricing, so it's not like you're just going to be going value everywhere else just to fit him into your lineups.
Yeah, exactly. He's not unattainable. They should have made him 11K this week, but
he should have been like Westbrook price. That's what.
They should be. Yeah, but fortunately for us, 9,400, not too bad.
No,
him for the touchdown upside anyway. But almost 200 rushing yards last week, over 260 total yards, and he has just a great floor. 2 weeks ago against Denver, didn't score a touchdown, still had 17 fantasy points. He's got 2 games with 33 or more in his last 3. And this is a good matchup for him against the Dolphins. And it's pretty staggering numbers when you look to see his red zone numbers compared to everyone else. He's got 45 rushes inside the 20 this year, and no one else has more than 30. And he's got 24 inside the 10, and nobody else has more than 19. 14 inside the 5. Nobody else has more than 11. He's literally the entire offense in that red zone. And he's just about as safe of a play as you can get. And you just know it's not ever a situation with him where they're inside the 5 or 10 yard line. He's not going to get a chance to score. He always does.
Yeah, when you look, near a 27 total this week, nearly 4 touchdowns in the way Melvin Gordon's putting it in the end zone. It almost seems like he has a lock for a touchdown, and the price is up a little bit, but I still think he's a guy you can easily slot in and even put in with Johnson if you want to go that route.
Yeah, he has 100% of his team's rushes inside the 5 yard line this year.
Yeah. GPP running backs, Jay Ajayi taking on the Chargers in that same game, 7,800. This guy's been just unreal over the last few weeks, and I thought it was going to, kind of end last week, but it didn't.
Yeah, last week, tough matchup against the Jets, and I know he broke off a couple big runs late, but either way, and I left him as GPP option, even though he's been really good because the Chargers have been really good against the run. Looking at the numbers there, 3.8 yards per attempt. They've given up 13 touchdowns, but most of the yardage damage has been through the air. And, I mentioned here the totals of what they've allowed to the top backs. 51, 54, 64, 46, 31, 56, 82, 34, and 70. And that 34 was Blake Bortles, who was the high rusher in that game. So, nobody's been able to run on them, but Jay Ajayi already has 2 200-yard games, and he's been running on everybody. So, definitely not a guy that I would play in cash games or even consider. But, you can't look past how productive he's been. And he's put up monster totals with really no involvement in the passing game at all.
Yeah, definitely. I think with the price increase, you're going to get him at a little bit lower ownership, even with his recent success, and especially with all the good backs that are there this week. And I do think, the floor just does seem to be a little bit lower against the Chargers defense, where if they don't give up those touchdowns, you're looking at really mediocre outcomes against this defense.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a spot that I really like, but I'm not a fool. I'm not foolish enough to just completely ignore him here.
Yeah, definitely. Jordan Howard, 6,900, really nice price tag. Coming off a monster game against Minnesota, which I don't play Thursday slates, but it caught us all by surprise if you did play that because you're not expecting that against Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm not a big Thursday slate guy myself either, and he was a guy that I instantly threw right on my bench in all my season-long teams. So I was like, there's no way I'm playing him in this game. I need more than 2 points out of my spots. But, it's an interesting spot for him this week because You're seeing that you've got Kadeem Carey was taking carries from him. Now Jeremy Langford is back, and but all the coaching staff just has all the most confidence in this guy, and they've said that he's the number one, and he should be. I mean, he struggled for a couple weeks, but his first couple of games, he was making good decisions. He was breaking a lot of tackles, and I mean, this is a guy that he's been very, very good, and I don't think anybody will really be on him this week because despite a pretty good matchup against Tampa Bay, it's a guy that did struggle for a couple weeks. Now you got two guys that could potentially steal carries from him, but I don't envision a scenario where they come out and say he's the number one guy and then don't give him 70-80% of the touches out of the backfield.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. I think you're going to see about that mark where 15 to 20 touches from him this week, and obviously at 6,900, really nice price tag on him. So in terms of a points per dollar return, you could be looking at a really nice day of 100 yards and a touchdown for a really nice price.
Yeah, and I mean, especially when you consider obviously David Johnson, Zeke Elliott, Melvin Gordon, Le'Veon Bell, all those guys expensive, but all in really good spots. I don't think any of these lesser priced running backs are going to see much ownership at all. I think almost everyone's going to be paying up because it's a lot of risk down in the bargain bin this week.
Yeah, definitely. And we kind of head down a couple of cheap guys here. 5,100 for Darren Sproles, who another guy where it seems the coaching staff has leaned in his direction in terms of being the number one back.
Yeah, and I love Darren Sproles. And, of course, it's weird to see that he's getting, a volume of carries and not a whole lot of involvement in the passing game. I mean, he does have 16 targets in the last 2 weeks, but he's only caught 8 for 31 yards. He only really had that one game that was a big game through the air, and that was 6 for 128 and a touchdown against Pittsburgh. But other than that, I mean, he doesn't have more than 24 receiving yards in any game. But 28 carries over the last 2 weeks, still hasn't scored a touchdown rushing, has that one receiving touchdown early. But, I mean, he's near minimum salary in a game where I think Philly's going to be down. I think Atlanta, I mean, we know how good that offense is. It's a close spread, but they're going to have to be passing the ball. And despite the fact that he hasn't been productive in the passing game, he's still getting a ton of looks, 9 and 7 targets the last 2. Plus, you got the nice floor from probably 10 to 15 carries. So I think he's the kind of guy that if you're going to pay down in cash games, I don't know why you would. I think he's the guy that I'd go with because 600 above minimum, he's almost a guaranteed bet to get you 8-10 fantasy points. And I mean, he does have some upside still.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you look here, and I think the only real thing if you want to do in cash games is pair him with David Johnson.
Yep.
I think if you're going with a wide receiver heavy type lineup and still want to use Johnson, Sproles is probably the only way to really do it. And as you mentioned here, I mean, I think volume wise alone, usually it's we just see the targets. We don't usually see the rushing attempts with it. And now the fact that that's there, it makes him a safer option.
Yeah, and I mean, Atlanta's been not a particularly good defense and 26th against pass catching running backs, according to Football Outsiders. So they're seeing almost 10 targets a game, and that kind of feeds perfectly into potentially the game flow and, Sproles' strengths too.
Yeah, certainly. Ty Montgomery next here, 6,200 against the Titans. I mean, this one, we look at this Packers offense, it's basically, Montgomery's been the back, and he's looked actually really good doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't a play that I particularly love. Like I mentioned here, this is a week to pay up at running back, and Sproles, like I said, is the one guy I really like cheap. And, it's possible you see James Starks out there this week. I don't think he's going to see a huge role right off the bat. And, I mean, Montgomery only has 16 carries the last 2 weeks, but you look at what his targets have been, caught 10 out of 12 for 98 yards, 10 out of 13 for 66, only 3 targets last week, but caught ended up with 38 yards. So he's got a decent floor for his price, and I'm not really worried about Starks coming in and taking much of that away. So as weird as it seems, because I still view him as a wide receiver, I think he's one of the few cheap options I'd actually consider putting in my lineups. And also mention here that if Carlos hides out, which it looks like he might play, DeJuan Harris, kind of by default, because Kaepernick just runs around scrambling around like an idiot, panicking, and dumps the ball off to him and lets him go to work. I mean, Kaepernick's going to throw like 19 interceptions this week, but he's probably going to complete quite a few screen passes to DeJuan Harris. So I want to play him this week, even though it's a tough matchup, because I think he'd be a nice option.
Yeah, in terms of the game flow, I mean, you're looking at pretty much they're 2 touchdown underdogs or something like that. So,
yeah.
You're expecting them to be down and Harrison get a few dump off passes if Hyde does it.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be video game nonsense when you're playing somebody in Madden and you're trying to sack the quarterback and he just keeps running around 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage like an idiot. That's what Kaepernick's gonna be doing this week, and yeah, I mean it's gonna be ugly. So players on his defense too, by the way.
Yeah, no, you definitely that's the top cash game defense.
Yeah,
GPP
yeah, go ahead and do that. They might
yeah.
score 100 points.
Yeah.
They might score more touchdowns than the 49ers do.
Actually, you know what?
I might make that bet. I'm going to find that bet.
You can find it. Anything's possible now. I've seen the worst. Yeah. I've seen the worst.
Give me 5-1. I'll take that bet. Not you, Vegas. I will take your money.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, there's very little of it, so please.
Yeah.
That's going to wrap things up with the FanDuel running back analysis for Week 10. Be sure to head on over to DailyFantasyCafe.com. Check out our great tools and content.